Welcome all. Thank you so much for being here on an important topic on the AI at scale. And it's not a new thing, but an important question that we are going to cover today. Is it more on the build, buy, or the partnership that is needed to make it a successful? And the beauty of this panel is that we have the entire ecosystem, including the enterprise, the chip and the semicon, as well as academia, who are here to speak about that how and what should be the strategy to do any of these. So I'll start with this, and Rainer, the first question to you is that when scaling AI, the stakes are very high, looking at from the cost, the complexity, the cultural shift. And in this journey, it's very important to make a decision that whether you want to build or buy the AI solutions, and how you make a decision by looking at from an enterprise perspective, keeping a lens of the customer experience as well as the productivity. So it'll be good to hear from you.
Thanks for the first question, Rajat. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. So to give a little bit of context, right? So BSH, Bosch, Siemens home appliances, we design, we manufacture, we sell, and we service home appliances for the kitchen, laundry, vacuum cleaners, and all that. And with that, obviously, we have a broad environment, a broad scale of areas where we can apply AI use cases. We have the manufacturing environment. We do have the classical enterprise environment, the internal processes accordingly. We do have consumer interaction. So everything that the consumer directly interacts with AI embedded into our websites, analyzing consumer feedback through AI that we're getting, and also leveraging, bringing, optimizing the models that are out there for finding our appliances. Who of you here in the audience has, over the last month, used ChatGPT or Gemini or any other model to ask about a purchasing decision? So what should I buy in this or that category? It's already quite a few hands up, and that's getting more and more people, right, to do that. So that's the third area, consumer interaction. And then fourth, even the products themselves, a smart washing machine, a smart oven, and so on. So those are the four areas. What we do there, how we look into it is there's two main areas how you can differentiate. Are you applying AI to hold up with the competition because everyone is doing that? Or are you applying AI really to differentiate yourself from the competition? Is that something according to your core competence, according to your own competitive advantage? That's where we're differentiating. If it's more the second one, if it's about something that should give us our competitive advantage, we go more for building, also for partnering. If it's something that's just to keep up, then it's more about the buying, because it's basically something that you can easily purchase and gain from the market.
I think so. It's good that you mentioned that how many of us use the ChatGPT. It's become one of the additional source to make a decision, or at least shortlist the decision that what should we buy, which brand should we buy. So it's an interesting insight that there's an additional source to make a decision on that. But only if we come to you, and one interesting angle that we look at is that buy often looks faster on paper, right? But it's harder on the integration. But if you look at what's the time you choose to build, even though the buy looked easier, and why was that the right call? It will be good to hear from you when you look at from a platform or from a semicon industry.
Thank you, Rajat. Appreciate you inviting us and being part of this. Is great. But if you noticed, Rajat introduced us as a semicon and chip company. I just wanted to differentiate a little bit. We are a full stack AI platform computing company. We accelerate across domains and work at the intersection of simulating the real world in a digital environment. We simulate physics of that world in that digital environment, and then we simulate intelligence in that digital world. So essentially, we work at the intersection of that, accelerating across these domains. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Great to be here. Fundamentally, if I have to answer this, I would need to build on to the first question which you asked. Now, I think, at this point of time of evolution of AI VR, I think we need to look at a new North Star for answering that question. The question is then, if you are looking at AI as production of intelligence, you're basically then looking at building a factory for producing that intelligence. The moment you use that constraint and understand this core critical to your enterprise, you are now shifting your focus from what you want to produce and how do you produce this better. That's your outlook to scale it, right? And then you construct that factory the way you would construct your factory. You build the core underlying infrastructure and machinery by partnering with the factory builder, which you would have. In this particular case, it would be the infrastructure provisioning for the compute, the integration of that compute and the networking part of it. And then you will focus on building your IP on it, which differentiates for you. This is where you put your efforts to build the intelligence on that core infrastructure. And then you would partner or buy based on the strategic nature of that for the non-core, non-strategic areas of your business operations. From that perspective, you again take the lens on the question you asked me, then it's no more so much of a decision matrix, right? It becomes easy for you to take. Infrastructure, you would obviously partner. You're not going to build your factory's machinery. And there also you would take a strategic call on how you're building it from a perspective of typical trade-offs of what you are building, whether you want to build it on-prem for you to build that core latency infrastructure, scale out, cost outlook, or you partner with a hyperscaler if your time to solution velocity requirement is higher, right? And that's how you would mitigate that. Sure. Sorry for giving you a
Before you move forward, are you audible at the end? Okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
This is a mic.
Is it better?
Okay.
Oh, really close.
So you mentioned about the IP versus building the IP versus the partnership, but how are you looking at the current scenario in the ecosystem when you speak to the customers or even on the technology partner side? What is the main motion at the moment going on?
So the velocity of transformation in the AI ecosystem is unprecedented. And honestly, we have seen this transition across technology curves through our lifetime itself, right? For the last 30 years, you look at transition happening every 5 to 6 years. But with AI, the transition has been in this scene of 2 years. Now, almost 10 years now, from 2015 onwards, we were in the process of building the core foundations of AI. Then it was primarily about training the model and then building core functionalities into that model. In the process, in the midterm of that, right, around 2.5 years back, major impetus came to us when we moved from transformers having the capability of training at the first level to having them the capability of reasoning on top of that. That's fundamentally transformative. The moment you did that, then the scaling law of the underlying infrastructure requirement, which was at that point in time just operating on the more parameters, more compute, more intelligence, one shot you get at the core underlying foundation model to scaling and on the application in real time. So saying Rainer today, when he asked ChatGPT, that ChatGPT is thinking on his question, right? It is not giving a one-shot answer. That now shifts the scaling to real-time scaling requirement on the compute. Now, in order to build that real-time scaling, you need to now take the trained model and then train it post the training to have that reasoning capability. That now shifts the scaling law to 3 of them, right? So pre-training scaling, post-training scaling, and scaling on real-time inference. So you would need to look at what you're wanting to do, whether it's core and strategic, and build it. The problem is it needs the mindset from the leadership that is core to us and the commitment for supporting that. You need to have an internal assessment of your capabilities so that the people, the processes, and the core foundation to run your factory is there. You need the core MLOps team who manages your infrastructure, the model builders who builds that competency for you and operates it, and then the culture to support this top down. All right? So,
got it. And Srivardhini, coming to you and picking some keywords from what Uni mentioned, the mindset of the leadership, the people and the processes. How are you seeing that in the ecosystem when you interact with the leaders? Are they confident or they're nervous about the AI capabilities on the platform beyond the ChatGPT or the perplexity? So how you see that?
I think I would put it this way. There is a lot of excitement. There's also a lot of anxiety. And there is, of course, FOMO, right? That's... Oh, okay. Yeah. Am I audible back there? Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of that going on. And I was doing a small research project with some of my collaborators on trying to understand how organizations are actually preparing for this. Digitalization in the AI age. Digitalization is a term that we have been hearing for 2 decades now. But what is it that's really happening now in the AI age? And one of the key differences is really about how do you evangelize AI within the organization? Now, this is coming up as a constant common thread in all the conversations, right? And this starts right at the board level and the CXO level, right? How do you get that mindset? How do you get the organization right from the top all the way to the bottom through the rank and file employees to be oriented in this direction? And it does not happen automatically. Though there is a lot of buzz in the environment, it does not happen automatically. So the responses have been, for instance, people bringing in independent directors at the board level who have this kind of a background, especially if you are leading a legacy company, a traditional manufacturing company that's not a native digital. How can you infuse this thinking right at the top? So one way of doing that is really bringing in a strong independent director who has this kind of a background and who can give that push. So that is very important because at the top management level, at the board level, you need that. A lot of some companies are also bringing in CDOs, Chief Digital Officers, and in many cases, the CIO, the information officer, is taking on this additional responsibility of being the digital officer, CDIO. But it's also being called out very explicitly because it's important to shine the spotlight and say this is very important. So it's not just about the title, but it's about what that title communicates to the rest of the organization, right? So that entire creating that executive level position, focusing on digital, this is very important. Then going down to the rest of the organization also, you need to evangelize, the idea of AI, right? And the challenge I feel is greater for companies that are traditionally from, manufacturing backgrounds, et cetera, as opposed to digital natives. So there are 2-3 things that companies are trying and nobody has fully figured it out. Like I said, there is a lot of excitement, there's a lot of anxieties also. But some of the early experiments have been around, okay, we have the board, we have the CDO, CIO, etc. Now, how do we bring consensus and commitment across the leadership? So people are forming AI councils, innovation councils that actually rallies the entire organization around this agenda. Then further lower down in the organization, it's about saying, okay, how do I train people? How do I upskill people? Right? How do I bring in new talent that is already familiar with this? And this requires a lot of consistent effort. And I'll give you my own personal example because I'm from IIM Bangalore and education is a sector that's been, in a significant way going to be affected by AI, right? So we are all constantly rethinking, what do we do as teachers? What do we do as researchers? How is our life changing? Now, despite being sort of plugged into this, it doesn't come naturally to me that I should do something using AI, whatever it is that I do on a daily basis. Because I'm conditioned to doing things a certain way for the last, 10, 20 years. So it requires a lot of deliberate, consistent effort to shift the way you work. And the same is true for organizations also. One, there will be resistance because there is always resistance to any sort of change and new tech. But beyond that, even if people are not resistant, even if they are open about it, there is a little bit of conditioning that has happened over the years. So you need that deliberate, consistent communication, hand-holding to actually shift this. This is a paradigm shift, right? From how we've been working to, let's say, working using AI is a paradigm shift in work. So that has to be reiterated consistently.
And Reena,
if I may quickly add to that.
Sure.
So totally support everything you were saying, Srivardhini. And I love it how you started with FOMO, right? And just want to quote a colleague of mine who always says, FOMO, fear of missing out, is not an AI strategy. FOMO is not an AI strategy. You need a strategy, you need a structured approach, how you tackle it as a big organization.
And as you touched upon, Vardhini touched upon the evangelization. That's very important. And when you look at your firm, like what is the playbook for the evangelization, creating that AI culture internally? That's very important. So what is your playbook around that?
I think there's also many aspects to it, and it starts with enablement, and you need a coalition of the willing, right? There's a lot of people in the organization from any area. It doesn't even have to be people with tech affinity, with high tech affinity. I got when I was traveling here, my uncle, who's almost 80 years old, he sent me a couple of pictures that he had generated with ChatGPT and so on, right? And he had never had to do anything with tech or whatsoever. So there is plenty of people in the company you wouldn't even imagine that they are part of the first movers, that they are willing to experiment and willing to get into things, try things out themselves, utilize ChatGPT and other things during their daily work, but also bring in ideas of what could be processes, what could be use cases to be leveraged with AI, right? So identify this coalition of the willing, and take them with you, enable them, take them forward, and somehow give them room, give them a community, moderate that, and then there's already a lot of bottom-up power, so to say. And then at the same time, you need the bottom-up approach of really setting direction, of identifying first initial use cases and communicate that accordingly. And not only, again, the tech focus of what was done or how it was done. That's also important, especially for everyone in tech who's more engaged in, oh, cool, what did we do here and how did we do that? But also what was the benefit? What was the value created from that? Additional point, ideally don't start with any use cases that makes people or manual work obsolete, because that might have the opposite effect, right? People getting more skeptical, more pessimistic about it. Do with something really where you're creating new services, new things. Can give one concrete example. For example, if this day you go to a shop, and I've been to a couple of shops here in Bangalore and in Mumbai over the last days for home appliances. If you go there, you want to buy a refrigerator. If you want to buy a washing machine, they all have labels on them now: smart, intelligent, with AI and so on, right? So you have to play that game along. So you have to create those use cases. You have to think of what is a first product feature, for example, and then market it accordingly and give the stage to it within the company and across.
And in this journey, when you're looking at building the new products, definitely you're looking for the partnerships. Now, to decide on the partnerships is an important angle. Look at the frameworks or the filters to decide with whom you will partner. How you make that decision, what are the criteria that you look at to make, let's say, to make a fridge smart AI, you need to partner with a lot of the technology partners or the services firm at the back end. How you make that decision that with whom you will make a partnership?
That's a tricky one, because that really highly depends. It depends really on the use case. It depends on the technical environment that you're acting within, right? It depends on established relationships. Obviously, in many of the areas, we do have implementation partners. We do have development partners. They also develop along. So ideally, if they know us, if they know the environment, if they can easily understand the use case, it's the easiest thing to take the existing ones along. That's usually the preferred option when doing the partnering. If we go for selection, there's two things. So also in SBSH, we have a dedicated department that's called the Startup Kitchen. And that's a separate unit that is directly assigned to the global CEO of the company. So they do have the exposure, the visibility to the top management, and they continuously screen for opportunities, for partners to go along with, that enrich us, that bring knowledge into the game and so on. And via them, we do have structured processes in terms of who do we proceed with, who not, and so on.
So yeah, only like he touched upon the startup kitchen, like how are you seeing the ecosystem that when to partner or buy? What are the key frameworks or the criteria that companies are looking at? Any thoughts around that?
Again, Rajat, and the way I look at it, and the way I was telling earlier was, fundamentally, if you look at AI as producing intelligence and you're creating a factory for it, your decision metrics on partnering. Sorry. So I was saying that, fundamentally, if you look at AI as producing intelligence and you're building a factory to support that production, your decision metrics on that is easy to understand now, right? So let's break it down from partnership. You'll obviously partner for building that AI factory machinery, right? Because that's not your core. Even if you're building a big biscuit factory, you're not going to build the machinery for making the biscuit, right? That's not your core foundation. You will build that partnering with a factory machinery builder for you. That would be the infrastructure, the compute, all of those. You would then build the models which differentiates you, right? That's where you put your proprietary data into it. You put your core company intelligence to train that and build that core differentiator for you. That's your secret sauce. And then you build and buy based on the non-strategic nature of the supporting functionalities from available service providers, and look at this with an approach of, whether they bring in the three C's, right? The competency to partner with you and deliver the value which is required for you. Do they have the processes to support that partnership and the culture for that? And then do they enable you to maintain that, add value to the core which you are working on? Now, Professor very nicely touched up on the organizational structure which is evolving, and the skilling of how do you communicate this into the core organization. Obviously, leadership commitment is absolutely required. This is not fire it and forget it type of an infrastructure outlook, right? So that commitment needs to flow down. Again, when you're looking at it as your factory, you are now looking at building that intelligence and then deploying and applying it. Two functionalities, right? So applying, you teach people how to use it, leverage it. It makes your life easy, right? And more productive. So that's pretty straightforward. Guide them, train them, and do that. But the core foundational thing, which is more critical, particularly for the audience here, given that it is more the capability centers and global systems integrators out here, is you would need to build a capacity for building AI. Otherwise, software will write software, and what will you do? Right? So that core skilling to build AI is fundamentally what a good percentage of your skill base need to transform themselves into. Now, on the startup ecosystem, we do a lot of work. I manage the startup ecosystem for the region. Our incubator is a virtual incubator which manages the relationship with the startup from just an idea all the way up to scaling them to what they are, including companies like OpenAI. We find them to the biggest disruptors. Some of them are sitting here who has become big now, biggest disruptors in the AI scenario which is going to come. India is pretty big with that ecosystem. So I think partnering with them becomes an extremely solid opportunity for you for non-strategic core functionalities within your big operation base itself. For an FSI, GCC, enabling a bunch of your routine processes with a core strategic startup, which is focused on registration tech, for example, or processing tech, becomes amazingly great for you, right?
Right.
Just wanted to add, because you inspired some other things also, and got me thinking, right? So obviously it also, the topic of partnership strongly depends on the environment that you're looking a partner for. And today at the keynotes, for example, you saw various models, like you have the infra, the model, and the agent layer, right? On which of these are you? What are you actually looking for a partner for? Also internally, Bosch Siemens Home Appliances, we apply also a framework towards AI use cases where you say we have three areas. We do have deploy, we have reshape, and we have invent. Deploy means really deploying standalone AI solutions, buying a tool with AI capabilities and giving it to the users for a certain use case, but it has AI built in accordingly. Also just applying ChatGPT or other large language models in the intranet. So in an internal instance, but towards the users of the company, but deploying more or less a standard AI solutions. That's the deploy scenario. For that, you need different partnerships than when you go for invent, where you really want to build your own solution and look for an implementation development partner accordingly. And then there is the biggest area actually in the middle, which is the reshape, which is using existing enterprise processes and building on existing enterprise software. For example, we as a large manufacturing company, we have a lot of SAP and Microsoft technology and all that. And obviously, probably like most of you, not everything on the most modern cloud version, right? We are not yet with S/4HANA in the cloud and so on. So no AI functionality yet usable there. But this is where we need to get to, and we don't need just the partners to enable the AI, but first to transform our system landscape also towards that in order to utilize the standard functionality that comes from all the vendors accordingly, and then to bring that into action.
But an important aspect to that is that within the deploy, do you have the talent ready for that? Like someone has deployed, but someone has to use the solutions. Do you see it as a challenge, or all is set for that also? It's an important question.
Honest answer, so. So again, I think there's like the coalition of the willing who can't wait to utilize that, but you also have to take those people along that say, I've been doing it always like, right? And to sell it, not only, it's change management in the end, right? If you're changing the system, if you changed the system 10 years ago, replaced an old system by a new one, you had to do change management. Now, if you're changing something towards more AI infused, you also have to do change management. How does change management work? You don't just say, now it's different, but you also have to tell a little bit the reasons why and the benefits and the value it brings for the company, but also for the individual people involved.
And Srivardhini, I'm sure you want to add to that.
Yeah.
That's a question to you.
Yeah. Just picking up on this whole build versus buy versus partnering decision, right? I mean, for a long time, we have debated build versus buy. And we almost make it seem like it's an either or choice. Yeah, it is not. And then, of course, for a long time, it was build versus buy. Then we said, no, partnership is very important as well. So build or buy or partner. So we have moved away from a world of or to a world of and today, right? It's all about embracing these paradoxes. These are not dichotomous choices. You do this or that. Companies have to do both. You have to build, you have to buy when you need to, and you have to partner. So it really has moved in that direction. So, and never has it been so important for companies to develop partnerships as a core capability, right? How do you forge successful partnerships? That itself is a capability. Not everybody can do it. I work with a lot of young companies, young ventures. They're very scared of partnering, right? I mean, because the moment you say you're partnering with somebody, you have one more person to take along. It's not easy. It's easy sometimes to say, okay, I'll just do it all on my own. But partnership unlocks a lot of value. It also reduces the risk. Your upfront financial outlay is going to come down significantly. You're spreading out the risk. So there are all kinds of good reasons why you should embrace partnership as an important strategy. That's number one. But even as you partner, and maybe to some extent even as you buy, the build part is important because there's this idea of what we call in the academic parlance as absorptive capacity, right? So you can only absorb something if you have a certain level of knowledge in that space. So unless you have a certain level of AI capability, no matter whether you partner, whether you buy, you're not going to be able to absorb that and make good of that. So I think it is important to remember that. So you have to build some, and I want to go back to what Rainer said earlier about if it's your core competence, if it's something that is very core to you, then yes, you should probably build. But if it's something that you want to quickly, use to either catch up, somebody is snapping at your heels, you have competition is heating up, a buy strategy is probably more useful. Partnerships take a little longer than the buy strategy. So you need to invest a little more time and effort into it. But they are great if you are looking at a horizon 2 to 3 years from now. If you want to take a punt on how the world is going to look and what it takes for me as in my company to succeed in that future state of business, then partnership is a great strategy. And partnerships are not new. Companies have been partnering for various things for many years now, right? And there is enough research, there's enough knowledge today, practitioner knowledge as well, on how you should partner, how you should choose the right partner, and so on and so forth, right? So there's the 5 C's of partnering strategy, which is there complementarity? Is your partner competent? Are you compatible? Meaning, can you actually work together well? There's congruence, meaning you have the same goals. And finally, founder to founder or CEO to CEO, is there good chemistry? So these are fairly well known, but the competence piece becomes very important when it comes to AI, because it's not just about the competence here and now. It's also about whether your partner is really at the edge of AI development and is able to sort of help you be on the frontier.
And you brought a new term in the room, the absorptive index.
Absorptive capacity.
Capacity, sorry. And what is needs to done to increase that capacity? How it can accelerate? What is the playbook around that?
So absorptive capacity is simply, I briefly mentioned about it. It's like you cannot, there was a time when, for example, the IT functions in companies were super lean, right? Companies almost did not have, they just had 2 people in the IT group and everything was outsourced. I think that will not work for AI, right? You need to have a certain level of expertise within, which means to some extent you have to invest on build. And when you do some build, then obviously you will have that absorptive capacity.
Really,
when I say absorptive capacity, do you understand the tech? Do you have the common vocabulary? Can you work with a partner? All of those things.
When you want to add to that, like what Srivardhini mentioned about this?
I mentioned earlier, right? Taking people along. This is the core thing. And one thing I think that also has to be understood really from the top is also to make room for experimentation. For me, AI projects also closely connected to data science projects in many times. It's a little bit like venture capital, right? How does venture capital work? You have 1 million startups, you invest in them, and with most of them, you may lose money, they go bankrupt, but some of them become a unicorn and they balance out all the others that you did. And this is the same as a company, that sometimes you have to accept that, you have to make room for that. Not everything will be the super, super big case. Not everything will be successful for technical reasons, for people-related reasons whatsoever. So there's many reasons why certain things fail, but some of them you have to make successful, and I think you have to count in also. And I think this goes along with this absorption capacity, that also you have this cultural readiness to accept not everything will go right. By the way, IT projects also not always have been successful, and it's the same for AI projects. So I think you have to live with that.
And only if we come to you, and all this technology requires a lot of investments, and everyone is looking for the ROI. But if you have to set a rule for the AI investments today, to protect agility over the next 5 years, let's say 4 to 5 years, what would that rule be?
I see, my core foundation thought is the same, right? The moment you treat this as production of intelligence, right? It's no more cost. It's driving your profits, right? The more intelligence, which is critical for your function, you produce, just like in the factory, you produce more. The more you produce and the more profits you make, the more intelligence, which is core foundational to your company, you make, the more profit it drives. Your second consideration then is, how does it reduce costs for your other operations, right? So, and then obviously the third consideration is, how do you mitigate risk out of it? With this lens in mind, it really is not a question of cost outlook. That said, if you have to look at an enterprise today and scale it, I would invest into building sovereign capabilities within the enterprise for my core intelligence requirement, and build that AI factory. And build it on an open standards open standards ecosystem. Build it with the open modular way, because you're not building a very rigid factory. You need to build an adaptable factory assembly line, right, for your core foundational intelligence building. And then, like ma'am was saying, you have established principles of partnering. So if your data center needs to be built immediately, you need to partner with the data center infrastructure provider for that. Or if your velocity to time to solution requirement is higher, you might look at the hyperscaler for that, because they have readiness for that, right? So you definitely need to scale and look at it from a profit perspective rather than a cost perspective. It changes the lens. AI is going to be extremely strategic. It's core foundational to the entire operations of your enterprise moving forward. And that core is not going to drop in value. It's only going to steeply increase in value.
And when you buy or partner, how do you retain control without falling into the vendor dependency? That's very important. Like, how do you ensure those things?
That's a tricky one. So the most important thing, I think, is not giving too much control really outside, right? So you have to staff the activity, the project properly, and also consider the availability of chipping in internally. Like, if you don't have anyone internal available to be involved and to steer the thing, to absorb the thing, to get a hold of the whole thing that you're doing, you better delay it. You don't do it, but wait until you get the person in place in order to steer that accordingly. And then really closely collaborate. And then, I mean, don't want to dive into contractual things in terms of, right, who does the intellectual property belong to and so on. There you can learn a lot, obviously, from traditional software development projects as well. You have the same questions there accordingly. But I think this is the main point, really, to have the internal capacity, steering available also to it. And don't do it like many companies do it with many projects. There is a person already 120% busy. Let's add another 20% to do this project part-time with the small finger or what is left of it, right? So really put attention to it. Either prioritize it accordingly or don't do it.
Only you interact a lot with the developer community. Like a straightforward question is, India is ready to take up the mega interesting, the advanced projects on AI to solve the industry use cases or specific problem statements by the public sector. Where do you see the developer ecosystem in India as of today?
My favorite country is the biggest producer of biological intelligence. And our mothers, sisters, daughters know how to train this biological intelligence, right? The new AI is all about training and simulated algorithm, right? It just is not writing code. And if we can produce 1.3 billion, we can produce a good amount of solid, high quality AI out of this country. Our strategic objective in the next 2-3 years, in my opinion, if you have to curve out of where we are, has to become a net producer of AI. The capability metrics in the country is extremely good, but it's very narrow and channelized. And the reason for that is because we have been in the information processing era building software. And when software is writing software, arbitrage is not a value proposition anymore. This robot is writing it for you. Robot can be anywhere in the world. And hence, you need to rescale. So there is a peak of the curve pyramid. Competency is extremely high. And bottom, which is not so good. They are applying AI. The top is capable of building AI. And I think we need to build that top's competency downwards across our ITS environment, particularly in the global capability centers and the global systems integration companies. But I'm very confident of our capability. And just to give you a factual number on that, when I started my journey with NVIDIA, the first thing I took up was to focus on education and spreading education within engineering colleges and building capability for them with AI labs. We established in just 1 year itself around 100 plus AI lab driven courses in it. You've seen the transformation of engineering colleges now coming out with AI specialized courses on that, right? We skilled almost 200,000 people in the country in span of just 4 or 5 years. But now our courses are free and paid, are just absorbed like crazy by the country. Skilling is happening. But whether you are skilling at the depth required is the question. And do you have the underlying infrastructure to support that skilling? And that needs a complete transformation of our education ecosystem, the internal ecosystem within the companies to enable that skilling for building AI. But developer competency, absolutely no doubt.
Got it. Srivardhini, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, as you were speaking, I think actually AI presents a great opportunity to the GCCs. Right? For a long time, I think we played the cost arbitrage game and we pushed beyond that frontier, right? A lot of GCCs have evolved beyond being just cost arbitrage centers towards taking more ownership, in fact, even complete product ownership and so on and so forth. But it's a constant struggle. Let's be very honest. It's a continuous negotiation and conflict that goes on with the headquarters. There is competition from other subsidiaries. So I think all of it's here to stay. It's not going away. But I think with AI, if we are able to jump onto this bandwagon soon enough, and Unni's been saying that we do have that capability, it can really be the differentiator. It can really differentiate Indian entities of the larger multinational from other entities, right? And it can become the plank on which you're able to add greater value to the corporation. So, and I think I'm starting to see that happening in a few GCCs where, there is a significant AI agenda mandate that is sitting here in India. And I think that's something that's very good to see. And I hope that becomes a more common occurrence.
Great. I think so. It was a great discussion. And it's very difficult to say that whether it's a build or buy or partnership. I think so the and plays an important role. That in this journey, it's a combination of all the three. So I think so many of us have the playbook also how to go after that. So I truly appreciate. Thank you so much for your time today for this wonderful discussion. Thank you. Thank you for the audience.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.